The moment Ivy clacked through the glass doors, I knew the weather inside had changed. Not just because of the way her stilettos stabbed the tile like they had a personal vendetta against grout. Not just because her little entourage, all manicured men with matching messenger bags, stood around her like backup dancers in a failed HBO startup show. No, I knew it when she spotted me knitting in the corner of the bullpen and said, with a performative little gasp, "Oh, you can take your knitting home. We're building the future here." The room went dead silent. I could hear the hum of the servers down the hall and the carbonation fizzing in someone's La Croix. I didn't even look up. Just slid the final stitch off the needle, clipped the yarn, and tucked the half-finished sock into my tote like I'd been waiting for this exact moment. Because I had. See, this wasn't the first time I'd been underestimated by a toddler in Gucci. This was the first time the toddler came with a C-suite title and authority over my codebase. Ivy Worthington, newly minted CTO by virtue of bloodline and burn rate, had arrived to modernize operations. That's corporate speak for kicking out the grown-ups and replacing them with people who say synergy without irony. Now, before we get into the whole flaming mess, real quick, if you're enjoying this little saga of polite vengeance, tap that follow button, would ya? 97% of you listening haven't, and believe me, it fires up our team more than cold brew and spite combined. Appreciate you. Back to Ivy. She called for an all-hands reorientation that afternoon. Sat cross-legged on a high stool in the conference room like a motivational speaker who sells bootstraps to orphans. She talked about velocity and vision and disrupting legacy workflows, all while pointedly not looking at me. Even when she got to the part about sunsetting outdated personnel structures, her eyes skipped over me like I was a chair. But her assistant, some poor ex-bootcamp dev named Skylar, handed out org charts with a little arrow next to my name labeled Transition Resource. I've had kidney stones that were delivered with more grace. That night I stayed late, not because I needed to, because I wanted them to see me do it. I moved my knitting bag off the desk, set up my backup drive, and opened the encrypted vault labeled LMI Core V3.2. That folder held 3 patents, 6 modules, and the backbone of the entire damn platform they thought they were reimagining. All built during my years as a consultant, all licensed to the company under revocable terms. My terms, my LLC, my signatures. Had gotten so used to me sitting quietly with my needles and my peppermint tea that they forgot I also held the blueprints. I backed everything up. Triple copies. One on the drive, one on cold storage, one on an offshore server in Reykjavik I'd set up after the first red flag back in Q2 when they started cutting QA budget and doubling ad spend. That's not disruption, that's what I call check your parachute. The next morning, my access card didn't work on the main server room. That's when I knew I was officially a ghost, and that's when I started smiling. Because when a ghost has receipts, she doesn't haunt. She invoices. They called it a strategic restructure, which is rich coming from a woman who once asked if Python was the one with the coffee logo. Overnight, my job title morphed from lead systems architect to principal legacy consultant emeritus, which, in corporate taxonomy, is code for keep her around so she doesn't sue, but don't let her near anything that plugs in. I lost access to the build queue. The private Slack channel I started 6 years ago with 3 devs and a pizza budget, archived. The last time I opened Jira, the dashboard said, no tasks assigned. A new PM, someone with a double-barreled last name and a resume full of UX philosophy, sent me a cheerful DM, just hang tight while we realign responsibilities. Then a winky face. I haven't felt that patronized since my ex-husband explained how a thermostat works. My calendar evaporated. No stand-ups, no one-on-ones, no sprint planning. I became the office ghost, floating between desks, nodded at but never spoken to. I could have dyed my hair blue, roller skated through the hallway blasting Pantera, and Ivy still wouldn't have noticed. I was background noise, but here's the thing about being background noise. You hear everything. Ivy strutted around tossing jargon like confetti, scalability, containerization, value unlocks, while her developer crew nodded and Googled half her sentences under the table. At one point I heard her say, the backend is basically plug and play, right? And I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. The backend was custom architected across 5 languages and 3 microservice clusters, all of which I duct-taped into harmony by sheer will and caffeine. Plug and play, my ass. Late one afternoon, I sat at my desk, same desk, just now wedged behind a pillar, and cracked open the hard copy of my original consulting agreement. It was signed back when the company was just me, the founder, and a rented server rack in Cincinnati. I'd insisted on my own lawyer, my own licensing language, and full ownership of anything I brought in. Clause 14b, proprietary components retained under L. Morgan IP Holdings LLC unless expressly transferred in writing. I hadn't transferred jack, there it was. Black ink, my name, their oversight, my parachute, and Ivy? She was too busy filming TikToks in the stairwell to read the fine print. I thought back to the winter of 2017, snowed in, broke, running my own consulting firm out of a studio apartment with a space heater that sounded like a dying goat. I built that first algorithm on a borrowed ThinkPad with a busted hinge. Slept 3 hours a night, survived on boxed Mac and expired protein bars. When they offered me a full-time gig, I kept the patents where they belonged, under my name. I was loyal, not stupid. So when HR asked me to sign off on some transition paperwork, I read every damn line. One clause asked me to reaffirm non-ownership of platform components. I crossed it out with a red Sharpie and added, IP exclusion retained as per 14B. Signed it, smiled, it's funny. They thought they were sidelining me. All they really did was take the training wheels off my revenge. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of gray-skied, coffee-stained day that tastes like burnt ambition. I was eating stale biscotti at my desk, watching the build logs like a retiree watching slot machines. Nothing hit, nothing moved. My terminal might as well have been a tombstone. That's when the ping came in, Slack notification, urgent channel, everyone tagged. Ivy had meant to DM her new product lead. Instead, she dropped a message in the #dev channel. All 43 engineers got it. Honestly, we need to purge the legacy deadweight. Lena's still here, why? The period at the end really sold it. Cold, clinical. The kind of sentence you write when you think people like me don't read anymore or matter. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. One dev sent a confused emoji. Another quietly left the channel. Jonah, the only one with a spine, messaged me privately. I'm so sorry. That was messed up. I replied with a thumbs up and finished my biscotti. 15 minutes later, HR pinged me, said they'd like to touch base. Always a bad sign when HR wants to touch anything. I met them in the glass fishbowl they call a wellness room, which smelled like cucumber and compromise. Rebecca from People Ops sat there with her I'm on your side face, clutching a manila folder. She offered me tea. I declined. We'd like to offer you a transition package, she said. 6 weeks of severance, and of course, we'd love for you to exit gracefully. Maybe even a LinkedIn recommendation? I almost laughed. They wanted me out, but kindly. Neatly. Like I was a stain on a white couch they could blot out with polite napkins. Of course, I said, smiling like a corpse bride. No need to make this difficult. Rebecca looked relieved. She slid the papers across the table. Legalese in 10-point font, interspersed with HR's favorite phrases. Without prejudice, mutual agreement, proprietary assignment. That last one nearly made me choke. Clause 7, employee relinquishes all claim to intellectual property associated with the platform. I clicked my pen, drew a single, clean line through the sentence. Wrote in tight cursive, IP exclusion retained as per original consulting contract, clause 14B, initialed it, slid the paper back like a poker chip. Rebecca blinked. Oh, I'll have to run that by legal. Please do, I said. I'm happy to wait. She didn't have a poker face, just awkward silence and a nervous smile. I left the room before she could stammer anything else. I didn't need her approval. I had the receipts. That afternoon, I packed up my desk, what little of it was left. My favorite mug. A worn notebook with sketches from my first architecture draft. The knitting needles Ivy mocked. I tucked them all into a canvas bag like relics from a war no one else knew had already ended. No goodbyes, no farewell lunch, just a hallway of averted eyes and whispered Slack threads. They didn't know what I knew, they thought I was done. But you see, I wasn't retreating. I was removing myself from the blast radius, and Ivy, she had just pulled the pin. By Friday I was vapor, no Slack, no GitHub commits, no notes in Notion. Just a polite farewell email that read like a fortune cookie, wishing the team great success ahead. Lena, and then nothing. At first, they celebrated. Could practically hear the espresso machine humming in harmony with Ivy's mood. She wore heels even taller that day, clicking through meetings like she was auditioning for Shark Tank. They thought I'd taken my knitting and gone full suburban. Gardening, pillets, maybe even a Facebook group for women in transition. Then came Monday. Jonah texted me, do you know where the deployment config went? The pipeline's failing at container registry. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The answer was already buried deep in a repo no one else had access to. My private repo. My naming conventions, my structure. The very veins of the system. But it wasn't just the config. The architecture itself was behaving like a haunted house, doors where there should be windows, switches that triggered nothing, systems that looped back into themselves like a python swallowing its own tail. Some poor new hire named Aiden tried to comment on one of my service orchestration files. // to do, what does Kronig mean? Kronig, an internal joke from 2018 between me and a dev who now sells surfboards in Oregon. It triggered a 3 a.m. cron job that handled rollback failovers during CI crashes. Without it, their deployments were now sprinting face first into a wall. Ivy, of course, refused to panic. She doubled down. Bring in help. She snapped during a team call, wearing a leather jacket that made her look like an angry flight attendant. There are offshore contractors who can clean this up in 2 weeks, so they brought them in. A team from Romania, another from Hyderabad. Smart people, skilled people, staring blankly at my code base like it was ancient Sumerian carved in lava rock. Jonah told me later one of the contractors quit mid-Zoom, muttering something about American tech ego and impossible spaghetti. Still, Ivy pressed on. She wasn't about to admit failure, not with investor demos scheduled, not with LinkedIn posts already teasing breakthrough architecture and next-gen scalability. So she smiled, held her breath, and lit the fuse. They picked a hard launch date, June 1st. No beta, no soft rollout, just one big swing. Meanwhile, inside the dev team, panic set in. Authentication started failing in staging. The autoscaler stopped auto-scaling. Payment logs triggered recursive errors that sent alerts to the founder's cell phone at 2 a.m. And then came the question. In a dev stand-up, the new CTO, some ex-McKinsey guy named Todd with cufflinks shaped like Bitcoin, asked, "Where's the pipeline schema?" A long pause. Then Jonah said it. It was in Lena's private repo. Silence. The kind you feel in your molars, Ivy blinked. What private repo? They all looked at each other like kids who'd realized the babysitter left hours ago and the house was on fire. The repo wasn't on the org's GitHub. It was in a vault server I had mirrored weekly to my LLC's infrastructure. The same one with the contractually protected code modules. The same one Ivy never asked about, because she assumed everything I ever built belonged to her now. But here's the thing about building things yourself from the ground up. While everyone else is pivoting and chasing funding rounds, you remember where you buried the bones. And Ivy? She didn't even bring a shovel. Jonah was the kind of dev who still believed in merit, poor bastard. While the rest of them were trying to pretend the backend wasn't held together with the digital equivalent of expired duct tape and passive-aggressive post-its, he was digging. Quietly. Late at night. Between deployment failures and Ivy's daily Slack affirmations about trusting the journey, he was the one pulling threads, and that's when he found it. A buried call in one of the container orchestration files, half obfuscated by abbreviations and years of tech debt, one line of code. He opened the file path, found the dependency tree, froze. The modules weren't just legacy helpers. They were the spine of the system, the API throttle, the caching layer, the event handler that allowed asynchronous task batching during high-traffic cycles. My stack, L. Morgan IP stack v3.2. My baby, he called Ivy into the thread. Hey, just flagging this. It's still pulling from the LM IP modules. Shouldn't we clarify the license? She replied 3 minutes later with a shrug in a sentence. Just comment it out, like you could comment out a nervous system. Jonah didn't, instead. Quietly forked the code and downloaded the full dependency list. Every import, every hidden call, every nested class that whispered my name in the system logs like a ghost under the floorboards. Meanwhile, I was in my kitchen, drinking lukewarm tea and watching the logs roll in. I'd set up the bot 2 weeks ago, a little script that sat in a cloud function, waiting. Every time one of my modules got pinged by an external IP, it logged the hit, timestamped it, and queued a billing entry. It didn't block the request. That would have been too kind. It just listened and tallied. One ping became 10, 10 became hundreds. The dev environment, the staging builds, even the test sandbox Ivy used to impress investors with live demos, all of them still running on my work, my code, my terms. The invoices didn't fire all at once. That would have been theatrical. They began silently. An email to accounting from invoices@lmorgan.com. Subject line, Q2 license usage report L, Morgan IP Holdings LLC attached. A CSV with request counts, timestamps, module names, and usage subtotals. It wasn't threatening. It didn't need to be, it was just business. Legal hadn't seen it yet. Ivy hadn't either. They were too busy pushing out promo assets and finalizing the launch stream. Rented WeWork had been transformed into a studio with LED panels and a fake mission wall featuring buzzwords they couldn't define. But Jonah knew. He'd seen the signs, the silence in the logs, the comment strings no one dared delete, the eerie way the system still functioned, not because of their work but in spite of it. He messaged me, just once. "You planned this, didn't you?" I didn't respond, not because I was being coy, because I was busy adding a new field to the invoice template. Per user licensing optional upgrade, the fire hadn't started yet. But the air was getting warm. By the time May rolled around, the office smelled like panic sweat and cold brew concentrate. Ivy had scheduled the full product launch for June 1st, big splash, big stream, big promises. They rented out a co-working space downtown with exposed brick and ring lights, hired some social media interns to run the launch like it was a goddamn Super Bowl commercial. Hashtags started flying. #NextGen backend #AI reimagined #built different. None of it mentioned me. None of it could mention me. They didn't even understand what they were standing on. And Ivy? She was too busy practicing her TED Light opening speech in front of the bathroom mirror to notice that the scaffolding was rotting. The dev team was unraveling. Long nights, sloppy merges, features that randomly vanished when pushed to production. Jonah quietly fixed what he could, stitched what threads remained, but even duct tape gives up after a while. He sent Ivy a formal email with the subject line, licensing risk with LMV 3.2 modules. Urgent body was simple. Just 2 sentences. The current system still runs on proprietary components authored by L. Morgan IP Holdings. I believe we are not licensed for commercial deployment. She read it. I know she did. Gmail logs don't lie. She clicked it, spent 47 seconds on it, and then hit delete. No reply, no meeting. Just a post later that afternoon on her LinkedIn, so proud of this team, we're redefining backend performance and trust. Stay tuned June 1st, eyes rocket light, her ignorance wasn't passive anymore, it was metastatic. Ivy paraded through planning meetings with a permanent smirk and a list of talking points that read like a BuzzFeed article for VCs. Scalable cloud-native containers, disruptive workflow paradigms. Lena who? Jonah tried again, slipped a note to legal. No response. Because here's the thing, no one wants to hear about a ghost when they're printing confetti. Meanwhile, I was busy, not lurking, not scheming, just documenting. Quietly. On May 18th at 3:12 a.m., I uploaded a batch of PDF files to the U.S. Copyright Office's e-filing portal. The full codebase of the L. Morgan Stack v3.2. Every class, every line, every module annotated, stamped, dated. The registration went live May 20th. Public record. L. Morgan IP Holdings LLC. System Architecture and Scalable Backend Design version 3.2. No theatrics. No announcement. Just a time-stamped landmine sitting in plain sight. I posted one thing that day. A single update to my company website. Subtle. All modules currently in use by external entities must be covered by active licensing agreements. Automated tracking in place. Usage reports processed monthly. That was it. No threats, just clarity. Back in launch land, Ivy was picking out which side to part her hair for the livestream. The dev team was one broken commit away from mutiny, but nobody spoke up. Fear turned smart people into ghosts too. June 1st was locked, and the closer it crept, the louder the silence got. Launch day arrived wrapped in glossy delusion and false confidence. The stream kicked off at exactly 10 o'clock a.m., right on schedule. Ivy strutted onto the camera stage in white sneakers and a cropped blazer, radiating startup messiah energy. Behind her, a giant screen flashed, "Meet the future. Adaptive backend AI redesigned from the ground up." Funny thing, that tagline, because the ground? Still mine. The demo worked mostly. A few hiccups, minor lag, one UI glitch, a rogue alert box with placeholder Latin, but Ivy played it off like a pro. Investors clapped in the chat. Twitter buzzed. The founder dabbed a tear from his eye off camera like this was a moon landing. At 10:41 a.m., 3 minutes after the final applause, the first domino fell. A soft ping hit the accounting inbox. From invoices at L. Morgan IPCOM subject, IP license fee Q1 usage report attachment, L. Morgan Holdings Q1 usage CSV inside, a neat little table. Timestamp server calls, module identifiers, runtime hours, total instances. Breakdown by environment, staging, production, demo. Final line item, total due. $182,600.00 USD due date. NET7 remit to L. Morgan IP Holdings LLC. Ivy never saw it. The intern managing the inbox flagged it as likely spam. But 40 minutes later, legal did. Their director, some poor man named Bryce who still wore shirt stays, forwarded it with a red flag tag to Ivy, the CTO. And the CFO with one line, "This looks enforceable. We need to talk now." Ivy skimmed it, paused, then replied, "Ignore. We've moved off that code," except they hadn't. At 12:07 p.m., Jonah replied all. Attached 2 screenshots, one from the codebase showing active calls to LM Stack v32 core and one from the deployment logs, timestamped during the livestream demo. Added a sentence that read like a shotgun blast. "We are currently running on unlicensed code. This invoice is not spam." That's when panic bloomed. Legal went silent, never a good sign. Slack channels erupted. Accounting pinged engineering. Engineering pinged DevOps. Ivy locked herself in the launch room, pacing, gesturing, chewing her thumbnail like it held secrets. Then the kicker hit. Jonah posted one more message, this time in the #LeadershipOps channel, just confirmed with the Copyright Office. The code was registered to L. Morgan Holdings on May 20th, its public record. Silence, static, breaths held. At 12:53 p.m., Bryce from Legal followed up. Also worth noting, per the original consulting contract, license auto-renewals were subject to renewal 30 days prior to use. According to this email, attached, my polite notice sent 48 hours earlier. Lena Morgan revoked auto-renewal. They were notified, confirmed received, all legal, all enforceable, all avoidable. But Ivy, she'd been too busy picking Instagram filters for the launch countdown. The CFO's voice was reportedly heard 2 floors down. "What do you mean we owe her $180,000? The party fizzled, investors ghosted. The champagne stayed corked, and Ivy, she stared at the invoice again. This time, she noticed something she'd missed. Additional usage above threshold will incur tiered fees per seat. And somewhere, in a little apartment with a purring cat and a corked bottle of Chianti, I clicked Send Invoice Q2 Projection. By the next morning, the buzz had turned rancid. What was supposed to be a triumphant launch story morphed into an inside-out piñata of liability and humiliation. Tech reporters started circling like digital vultures. First, a quiet tweet from a freelance journo, hearing rumblings of a licensing fiasco at yesterday's launch. L. Morgan Holdings involved? Eyes, then a thread, then a headline. Startup's big launch built on unlicensed IP, sources say. Legal trouble ahead, and just like that, the fire spread. Investors who had flooded Ivy's inbox with champagne emojis the day before now replied with links to Reddit threads. One wrote, "Please clarify situation. Urgent. Cannot have exposure here." Another one simply asked, "Is Lena Morgan suing us?" She wasn't, I wasn't, I didn't need to. The paperwork was doing all the speaking for me. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. The founder looked like he hadn't slept. CFO's left eye was twitching like a Morse code machine. Ivy, still trying to steer the wheel of the Titanic with a post-it note, pitched the line she'd been rehearsing all morning. "It's a clerical oversight. Reviewing our licensing agreements and will resolve this amicably." Bryce from legal, now very much not Team Ivy, slid a packet across the table. "My original consulting agreement, highlighted, annotated. Clause 14b circled in blue. IP usage rights granted via renewable license under L. Morgan IP Holdings LLC. No transfer of ownership." Then, attached below, the notice I'd sent 2 days before launch. Subject line, termination of licensing, auto-renewal effective immediately. Signed, delivered, confirmed. "It's not a threat," Bryce said flatly. "It's enforceable, they owe her." "How much?" asked the founder, already pale. Bryce clicked. "As of now, $182,600, with Q2 projections and per seat usage closer to $460,000, and climbing." That was when someone gasped. A junior board member pulled out her phone and played a clip someone had dug up from Ivy's now locked down TikTok account. A behind-the-scenes video from launch rehearsals. Ivy laughing into the camera. "Lena, that woman just knits and coasts. We rebuilt everything she touched. This is my platform now." The room went silent. She hadn't rebuilt anything. She hadn't even read the documents she signed. Jonah, sitting off to the side, spoke up for the first time. "Didn't rebuild it, we reskinned it. The core's still hers." The founder looked at Ivy. "Is this true?" And for the first time in months, she had nothing to say. The board didn't yell, that would have been a mercy. They sat in cold, horrified stillness. When asked Bryce what happens if we don't pay, he answered without blinking. "She'll pursue collection, and if it goes to court, she has timestamps, contracts, back-end logs, copyright registration, and direct usage pings. We'd lose. Publicly." Fast, the founder rubbed his face like he was trying to erase it. "Get her on the phone." But Lena Morgan doesn't take calls. Especially not from people who laughed when she knit peaceably at her desk, building empires while they built pitch decks. The only sound in the boardroom was the buzz of a paused TikTok video. Ivy's voice still hung in the air. "That woman just knits and coasts. Correction. That woman built the machine you're bleeding from." The emergency board meeting was held in the conference room with the soundproof glass walls. Ironic, considering the shouting could be heard from the parking lot. Ivy arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by her usual entourage of silence and self-assurance. This time, no heels, just white sneakers and a blazer that suddenly looked like armor without the army. The founder didn't bother sitting. He stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, face drained of every venture-funded dream he'd ever sold. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. "Who did this?" he asked, voice brittle. No one answered. Bryce from legal simply slid another printed invoice across the table. Q2 projection, $460,000. Notes included itemized usage, full copyright confirmation, and 3 polite notices ignored. Jonah, seated near the door, didn't look up, just muttered, "We all knew." No one listened. The CFO, usually a corporate statue, finally spoke, calm, tired, like someone reading a eulogy that started as a pitch deck. "You built this company on stolen tech." Ivy's jaw moved, but no sound came out. She flipped through the paperwork like she could change its meaning by smudging the ink. The founder cleared his throat. "This is a formal request for your resignation, effective immediately." She didn't cry. She didn't argue, just stood up, as if someone had finally whispered the truth loud enough to reach her skull. Left without a word. The door clicked behind her like a gavel. Later that afternoon, my inbox pinged. Subject L. Morgan Licensing open to negotiation. From board at company name Tone, desperate dressed as diplomatic. "Dear Miss Morgan, we'd like to open a dialogue regarding a possible renegotiation of the licensing terms for your intellectual property. Given the recent misunderstandings, we hope to find an arrangement beneficial to both parties. Sincerely, the board of directors." I didn't reply. Instead, I sipped wine from a glass the size of a small fishbowl, seated under a pergola in a quiet vineyard north of Florence. My laptop hummed softly beside me. A cat I didn't own dozed across my sandals. The hills rolled out like green silk under a tired sun. I logged into the back end of my licensing portal, opened the pricing dashboard, clicked Edit Terms. Under Global License Agreement, I changed one line, per seat pricing, enabled, retroactive fees applicable, saved, closed the laptop, and picked up my knitting. Silence is a powerful tool, so is paper and spite, and remembering exactly where you buried every fuse waiting for the match. I never raised my voice, never made a scene. But when the reckoning came, they knew exactly who did it. There's something deeply satisfying about seeing patience win over ego. It reminds us, real power isn't in the loudest voice, it's in the smartest contract. When you're underestimated, don't get mad, get meticulous. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old manager spill their coffee in fear.